This video will walk you through the use of the CI-KC 2-tank installation kit. Here is how the kit will tie into your system. The connectors are 24-inch corrugated pipes that have a threaded connector on one end and a slip connector on the other. The first slip connector will tie into the incoming water flow on your pre-plumb, and the threaded end will tie into the inflow side of the first tank. The threaded end of another connector will tie into the outflow side of that tank, and the slip end will connect to a stem connector that's going onto the inflow side of the sediment filter housing. A stem connector on the other end of the sediment filter housing will connect to the slip connection of another connector. The threaded end will tie into the inflow side of the second tank, and a final connector will be threaded into the outflow side of the second tank, and the slip connection will lead back into the pre-plumb. Please note that this kit is designed for tanks that have the red bypass valves. It is compatible with the CS-F1 and the CS-F4 whole house filter and salt-free water softeners. The parts included in this kit will include 2 Pro-Lock stem connectors and the 4 corrugated pipes that are called Clack to Slip connectors. The following supplies are recommended for the install: 1 roll of plumber's tape and a small bottle of pipe dope. We will begin the install by prepping the stem connectors. Plumber's tape will need to be applied to the threads on both of the stem connectors. A layer of pipe dope can then be applied to the plumber's tape on the threads. Do note that the MNPT fittings that are shipped with your tank will not be required when using this kit. You will begin by using the slip end of one of the connectors to tie onto the pre-plumb. Press the connector all the way in to seat it in place. Bend the other end of the connector towards the first tank. You will be connecting to the inlet side of the first tank. Press the connector all the way in until the white O-ring is flush. The collar will then be fully tightened to seat the connection in place. The threaded end of another connector will now be threaded onto the outflow side of that same tank. Fully tighten the collar to seat it in place. A stem connector will now be threaded onto the inflow side of the sediment filter housing and fully tightened by hand. A wrench will then be required to fully seat the stem connector in place. The connector that's leading out from tank 1 will now be positioned so that the slip connection slides onto the stem connector. Press the slip connector all the way onto the stem connector to lock it in place. The other stem connector will now be threaded onto the outlet side of the sediment filter housing. Fully tighten by hand, and then use a wrench to fully tighten the stem connector in place. Align the slip end of another connector with the stem connector you just installed and press it in place. Bend the threaded end of that connector to the back of the other tank. It will be connected onto the inlet side of the second tank. Fully tighten the collar to seat the connector in place. The threaded end of the final connector will be connected to the outlet side of that second tank. Fully tighten the collar to seat it in place. The slip end of that connector will tie into the pre-plumb that's leading back into the home. Your system should be configured like this. Congratulations, you are now complete.